getting a win. It looks like their time has gone, and the fat lady is singing. And the Texans had a difficult game this time. I'm still figuring. Let me see if they're gonna call a play here or what's gonna happen. But it looks like the Texans are Texas are having had a hard game here and are gonna come away. Whoop, there's 1 second left on the clock. So let's watch and see what happens with the Texans. I'm streaming live from Japan, and it was a great game. This game, I'm really excited to see what happened in this game. In this episode, we're gonna talk about the offensive line's performance, a little bit about Bobby Slowick. There's 1 second left on the clock. Anthony Richardson has been having a difficult game this time. Watching here. I'm excited for what's been going on for the Texans. And if you're just joining in, it's been an awesome game. I've been watching this game. A few talking points we're going to talk about is the offensive line performance. It has been a questionable offensive line performance for the Texans. Also, we're going to talk about Bobby Slowick and how Bobby Slowick has called this game. I I'm happy with what's going on with Bobby Slowick and how he's been calling this game, especially to get Joe Mixon working. He's mixing with Mixon in there. We'll also discuss the coaching battle and how D'Amico was able to get the most out of our defense. And shout out to the Texans fans at the game. The game looked empty in the beginning, but the Texans fans made it packed, and it's getting loud in here. So we have the last play of the game on the 49-yard line of the Colts. Anthony Richardson back. He drops back. He's looking for an open pass. Oh, Will Anderson. And we got a sack by Will Anderson, pressure fumble, and we pick it back up. And it looks like the Texans have secured the dub. Will Anderson picks up the ball in the final seconds. So let's get into it. It's Lance Hayes with Sports Social Live. I'm coming to you streaming live from Japan. I am the #1 global Texans fan, and I can make that statement because I've done this all over the world, even deployed in the middle of nowhere. So let's talk about it. Let's get right into it. The Texans defeat the Indianapolis Colts, and it was a great game for the Texans today. I wouldn't say great game holistically because we know we had offensive line issues coming into this game, and they were able to weather the storm for the team. I'm excited for what's going on with this. This was a good kind of staple play to show the Texans have grit and they can get through adversity. It was a good coaching game. You see that Bobby Slowick was able to make adjustments. D'Amico Ryan, they were able to call the good game management calls. Everything I've been talking about this week, the Texans have been doing, and I'm excited for that. So, without further ado, I'm going to talk about these guys who we put on trial. We put the offensive line on trial, and for a lack of better words, they did. I'm not going to say they did bad. They were average, right? Kenyon Green, suspect as usual. He's our suspect number one. He came out and he ended up, I think he came out great on that first drive. I wasn't mad about Kenyon Green on the first drive, right? He did well. He wasn't doing bad, but that second drive, Kenyon Green definitely came out and was getting attacked by the Colts. We knew it was going to happen. We knew the Colts had some studs on their side, and they went right at Kenyon Green, and he looked terrible, terrible. And you had to just look at the guy and just say, hey, brother, get off the field. It knew it was a short leash this week with D'Amico coming out saying, hey, we're going to make any and every adjustment. You had Slowick on the hot seat. He was pulled immediately after that play. And I'm happy that he was pulled because it shows the offensive line, just because you're a high draft round pick, just because we spent money on you, we will put you on the bench and sit your butt down. And that's what happened. He was on the sideline looking sad with all the sad faces. Hey, dude, you didn't play well enough. But shout out to the Texans O-line. I like how Laramie Tunsil, you see when they say, hey, we're going to let Kenyon Green play his game. Laramie Tunsil wasn't focused on helping Kenyon Green as much this game. You see Kenyon Green had a lot of one-on-ones, and it was able to kind of pinpoint the issue for the Texans O-line, And I'm happy that you had Laramie Tunsil not looking like he has been in the past, and to see that Kenyon Green was the cancer for the offensive line. Laramie Tunsil and Juice Scruggs and everybody was helping Kenyon Green. And now when it was an isolated issue, he was a point, and he was ended up being benched, and Patterson came into the game. Patterson came into the game doing extremely well, in my opinion, against that front seven of the Indianapolis Colts. Patterson was solid. I was not mad at that until he got hurt. And then Bobby Slowick had to make that call to go back to Kenyon Green. I heard that Gerard Johnson, and you see it all up and down Twitter, Gerard Johnson was on Kenyon Green's butt on the sideline. And I'm happy that somebody's finally getting some fire out of these guys, because this offensive line seems more like a finesse prima donna type offensive line, and not an offensive line that puts the dip in their mouth and gets after it with a camo. I liked how when Bobby Slowick did have to go back to Kenyon Green was able to be a solid fill again. Because I don't think he's going to be a mainstay on the offensive line. If I'm Nick Caserio, I'm on the phone in the second quarter of this game looking for the best offensive lineman on the board. And that's all I'm going to do. I want Caserio to do that. So this is Sports Social Live. I like going live after the game. I'm the number one global Texas fan for sure. And it's 3 o'clock. What is it? 4 o'clock 5 o'clock in the morning. I have to go to work a little bit later, but I'm going to give you my all for this live stream. And I have to go back and about giving it all and having some tenacity and grit. Hey, I like the way that you saw Laramie Tunsil. I like how Juice Scruggs, even though they had mistakes, Shaq Mason, Tice Howard, they showed some grit this game. They got knocked down. They're getting back up. They're scrapping. That's something that we did not see against the Packers. We didn't see against the Vikings. These guys are showing grit and tenacity, and they're getting knocked down. They're making mistakes. They shake it off. They go back at it. CJ still had to work very hard this game. I guess it's just frustrating to see that CJ had to still work and bust his butt to get anything. And you could kind of say he had a subpar game and he missed some good throws. But hey, man, when you're on your back the whole game, it kind of looks, and if you're a real Texans fan, like I am, a real Houstonian from the H, you remember David Carr having that kind of PTSD of constantly getting put on his back. And I think that's what CJ kind of was dealing with, having to constantly move off the mark and make dynamic plays because of this offensive line being so poor. But shout out to the four guys. I mean, I'm not mad at how Juice Scruggs, Shaq Mason, Titus Howard, and Laramie Tunsil played this game. And I'm also not mad at Jared Patterson for coming in and doing a solid job filling. I do foresee coming up this week that we'll see either Kendrick Green getting into the line mix-up if Patterson's not healthy. If Patterson is healthy, Patterson will be playing. But I also see that Caserio is going to have to get on the market and get us an offensive lineman for the Texans. So, hey, what do you think about the Houston Texans offensive line? How do you think they'll play going forward? And what would the mix be? This year's offensive line, even with the mixes, are not doing better than last year, in my opinion. Last year was trash, but this year is still trash. So what can we do to improve this highly paid, overdrafted offensive line? Tell me down below in the chat. I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to talk about somebody I've been on his head. I've been talking bad about this. Not bad, but just holding him to some type of expectation. Let's talk about Bobby Slowick. Bobby Slowick called a good game. You can't be mad at what he did. He made adjustments. He called a game that is for the personnel that he had. As you know, if you notice through the game, Bobby Slowick was able to kind of get somewhere with the quick hitting plays from the Texans offensive line. And I'm not mad at it, man. I'm not mad at what he did. He minimized the long developing plays. He got the offensive lineman downhill. No more left and right fancy plays that take 4 seconds to develop. Shout out to Bobby Slowick for calling a solid game. He really dumbed down the offense. And what I've been saying a lot on my lives and on just anytime I get on, you have to get the tight ends active. And he was able to get Dawson Schultz and Cade Stover active this game. The reason they needed the tight ends active is simply because the tight ends are going to be an outlet pass for CJ when our offensive line is not the best at pass pro. So he got Dawson Schultz active, he got Cade Stover active, and now the linebackers have to be concerned about those big tight athletic tight ends running and tumbling down the field. Also, he also used those tight ends to assist in chip block. But with Laramie Tunsil not having to work so much to make up for Kenyon Green this game, Laramie Tunsil was able to work on those defensive ends or outside rushers coming from the outside. So shout out to Bobby Slowick for calling a solid game with what the personnel that he has. That's a difficult thing to do for a lot of people. And he was able to kind of get out of his own head and make a good call for the Texans line. See, that's my alarm to go to work. It's 5:30 in the morning. I'm still in here, slow loud and banging about the Texans. So Bobby Slowick called a good game. If you think Bobby Slowick called a good game, throw the H's up in the chat. I like what Bobby Slowick kind of did this game with his personnel. I like how he was able to get Tank Dell involved. He was able to go down and get Hutchinson, Woods. The receiving core was able to get involved in this game, and you cannot be mad at that. There was a slow time in the game where I kind of had to think, hey, what is going to happen with Bobby Slowick? There was a time in this game when you can just kind of see that it was going to be on his back. The team was going to have to be put on their back by somebody. TJ couldn't get anything off. Bobby Slowick kind of dialed in, went back to Joe Mixon, and kind of I'm okay with the quick hitting zone plays between the guards, and that's kind of what Bobby Slowick went to. If you play football in high school, junior high, college, you know that little 31, 32, you get 31, 32, you get them in between the guards and tackles, whatever you want to call it. That's going to be quick hitting, and that's what we had to do to get the pressure off of CJ. And I think Bobby did a great job of dialing that up. And I got a point. I have a talking point. I'm going to talk about Joe Mixon a little bit later because that man's a beast. Joe Mixon is that dude when it comes to yards after contact. He's also put it on for veteran running backs. And you got to give it, I'm excited every time he touches the ball because he's making plays coming from the backfield. Joe Mixon is that dude. Shout out to Joe Mixon. He actually put the team on his back, and he has the offensive line working. They are working with, they get encouragement when Joe Mixon's on the field. So shout out to Joe Mixon. Another little point I had, and I'll keep on talking about this point, is that CJ shows resilience, man. CJ Stroud, you got to give him his credit where it's due. Yes, he could have made some better throws in the game. Yes, CJ missed throws, but that wasn't from a lack of effort. It wasn't from a lack of moving off the point. The dude simply just has to get an average offensive line. When the offensive line plays average, CJ is going to do well. If our offensive line plays average, Bobby Slowick can call plays. The running backs can go off. And the Texans would possibly be, and this is a shocker take. The Texans would be undefeated if we had an average offensive line. And you can post that. I'm saying it here now. The Texans would be undefeated if we had an average offensive line. And I stand on that because if you look at what's been going on with the offensive line, I don't think that we would have been off the field as much if our offensive line was playing to par, not above par, not subpar, just average pockets. And I think the offensive line is trending that way based off this game. But you just had as I mentioned before, they made the adjustments and we were able to stick with them. Let me know what you think about the offensive line and CJ Stroud's resiliency. And I'm happy with what's going on with CJ Stroud's progression because it's hard to progress when you always on your back or you're stressing about being tackled or tackled for loss. It's hard to progress, but he's been doing it. And you know who gets credit for this CJ's success and you got to give him credit for it. You got to give credit to Gerard Johnson. Gerard Johnson is protecting CJ. He's doing what a good QB coach is supposed to do, and he's probably going to go on to be an excellent offensive coordinator. Shout out to Gerard Johnson for being that guy for the Texans and protecting CJ, put him in a great position to be successful. I like what he's doing. I like what the Texans have done with Gerard Johnson on there. So we have a lot going on with the Texans, and I see a lot of people saying different things about CJ all up and down Twitter, X, if you're on it, whatever you want to call it. CJ is not the reason why drives stall. I will give hit this game is the first time I've kind of been like, hey, this is a little bit more CJ than anybody else. I will say that. And if you believe and agree with me, hey, post it down in the chat. But ultimately, I think that CJ has been doing well, decent with what he's been given. So shout out to CJ and how much resiliency that he's shown. Going down the stretch, I believe that I have a couple of stats. His stats don't do him justice. I have the stats, but I'm gonna look it up right now. CJ's stats really don't do him true justice. They kind of just make him seem like he was playing average, but when he's given what he's been given, dude has balled out. Let's go to the last game here and just see. Let's see what we can do. Okay, computer, you don't want to work with me? Cool. Let's go. So CJ has been difficult for CJ to kind of get off and go off. And I want to see him do more. I want to see CJ pull the ball down and run. You see, when I say that, I'm not saying go be like Anthony Richardson and try to do triple option, double option. I want to see CJ pull the ball down and go and get those 5 and 6 first down yards, the little turkey trot yards and slide that you see Tom Brady getting, that you see the other quarter like Patrick Mahomes, the little fat man jog trot to get the first down. That's what I want to see CJ do a little more of. I believe some of the sacks and pressure is because he's holding the ball, waiting for a longer play to develop. If he were to get comfortable pulling it down and hitting the fat man jog to the sideline or to the pylon, I believe he will be in a better position to make those plays. And that's just kind of something that I've noticed that CJ has struggled with. And I think they're kind of getting them in the habit of just being prepared for that type of check down run, going for the goal, just getting in there, man. I don't know what's going on with that, but I believe that he's playing a good game. Let's look at the stats for the game. The team stats. So the team stats for the game, we have total yards. The Texans come out with 365 yards to the Colts 287, which is still a lot more considering at one point Anthony Richardson was 2 for 13, which is crazy. Passing yards, CJ went for 267. Colts went for 124. Rushing yards, although although you could have said that Mixon went over 100, but then he had that loss. So now is 98 rushing yards to the Colts, 163 rushing yards. And you got to shout out to Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor and Mixon had a great showing at running back. Yards at the contact, they were rumbling and tumbling and doing a phenomenal job. So shout out to these two running backs for being successful. Like, tell me how you feel about the running back play this year across the league. Veteran running backs are balling out. They're doing a lot for the league, and they're kind of going to change the tide. I don't believe that this is going to be a super they're going to forget about the running backs. It won't be any controversy when it comes to running backs getting paid. Derrick Henry showing it, Mixon showing it, Taylor showing it. So shout out to the running backs this year because they are balling out. And then keep on going. The yards per play, the Texans beat the Colts in yards per play with 5.4 yards to the 4.6. I like that stat because the Texans have lost that stat a lot of the times because we're not able to do the long plays, and we're always put in third and long pretty predictable plays. Texans did a great job of increasing the yards per play this game. Texans go on to 21 first downs to the Colts 17, and 4 for 13 on third down efficiency. But a great stat that the Texans had on defense is holding the Colts 2 for 13 on third down. 2 for 13 on third down. That is a great stat by the Texans. And another stat by the Texans that I like and I love the trend. The Texans have only made 5 penalties, and one of them I don't think was a penalty, but 5 penalties for 30 yards. If you would have told me that this would have happened earlier in the year, I would have been surprised. The Texans are becoming a more disciplined football team as the year goes on. 5 penalties for 30 yards. I believe a stat was saying that the Texans are the number 3 penalized team in the league. I think the trend that we're seeing now is that we're becoming more disciplined and locking in. So shout out to the Texans for kind of just coming into their own in the mid-season form, going towards this tough game against the Jets, and then we got a bye week and then another tough string. So they need the discipline as much as they can, especially with the flaws that we have on our team. I like what I'm seeing from the Texans. I'm not mad at it, but one of my biggest things, I think we could have capitalized on the time of possession that we had. The Texans were kind of lacking at a time of kind of lacking at capitalizing on in time of possession. It was a Tommy Townsend show for a long time in the game. It was a punter show, just punts back and forth, back and forth. The Texans have to capitalize off of these drives and start putting together drives where they can score. Right now, I don't see the Texans being able to score at will or put together those game-winning drives like you would see a Ravens, Chiefs, Rams, Lions put together those drives to where, okay, let's go get it. They have the talent, but it just seems like we constantly stall. If it's not one thing, it's another. So I want to see what the Texans are able to do as with this time of possession. Just because we have 35 minutes of possession, I question the finishing of the team. Speaking of finishing, we have to discuss another thing about the Texans that I thought we did better at this year. This week, the Texans were able to come out in the second half and actually look decent. The Texans have not been decent in the second half this season, and I think this was one of the better second halves that you could have of football for the Texans. They came out, they were pressuring on defense, and the offense had some type of tempo, but it wasn't like the Green Bay game or the Vikings game or just the previous games against New England where they just come out just puttering. Um, and one thing about New England, you have to give them a little bit more credit. Drake May's not doing bad out there. He's a baller. So the Texans have been playing in quality teams. It just kind of goes under the radar. But the second halves have been duds for the Texans, and this second half almost got away from us with that fumble by Mixon, or kind of just clashed by Mixon down there. So the second half almost got away from us again, but we were able to be successful in this second half. I don't want to talk poorly about Joe because what do you know, Joe? Joe was mixing. We were mixing with Mixon, and I'm happy that I can say that proudly and confidently because Mixon had a hell of a game this game. Mixon went crazy. 26 carries for 94 yards. He would have had 100. He broke 100 in the game, but he had that a couple of tackle for a loss to kind of take us back. But 26 carries for 94 yards with average of 3.6 yards. And that's kind of the mark that I wanted Mixon to be at. 3.6 yards average and 1 touchdown. And they were rumbling, tumbling touchdowns. And that's what you need. That tenacity, that grit, the yards after contact to get the offensive line going. Shout out to Joe Mixon for doing his thing and balling out. It was a solid effort from Joe. And I'm happy that he's our running back. And I shout out, you know what? I thought we would see more of Dameon Pierce in the backfield as well to kind of spill him. You seen Dare a lot more than Pierce, which is odd to me. So what do you think about that, seeing Dare out there kind of just Dare a little bit more than Pierce? What do you think about that? Tell me how you feel just seeing these guys do what, just kind of mix it up. I like Pierce. On the I like Pierce on the punt returns. I like Pierce on the punts. I like Pierce. I mean, excuse me, on the kick return. Sorry, trying to look at my phone. I like Pierce on kick returns, but what the hell is going on with him not being in the backfield a little bit more? So, what are your thoughts on Pierce not being in the backfield that much? He looks like he has his step. He looks like he's ready. I think they just have more trust in Dare. They called him third and Dare. I think Pierce will be a little bit more dynamic than Dare, but obviously Slowick has other plans. Joe Mixon, though, is dominant for the Texans. Joe Mixon is balling when it comes down to getting in the box and kind of just being that mainstay, that stable running back that you need in the backfield. One thing I will want from Joe Mixon, and I think that it kind of goes under the radar because he's such a dynamic rusher, I want him to catch a little bit better. I mean, he has a couple of drops this year in some running plays, and I'm like, man, I wish this dude could catch a little bit better. That way we can just go off that much more. But that's only a small thing that I want to improve from Joe Mixon. Other than that, the grit, the tenacity, the run strength, the yards at the contact, the kind of just his ability to take the defense, take what the defense gives him with the patience. It's just amazing to watch. It reminds me of kind of uh LT, LaDainian Tomlinson, and then you kind of put a mixture of Le'Veon Bell when Le'Veon Bell used to do like the jump step and then get going downhill. I just think it's so dynamic to see these guys run with so much dominance. And shout out to Joe Mixon and what he's been able to do with this ragtag Texans offensive line. And they are ragtag. That the offense line is a ragtag line, but he is able to go in between the guards nonetheless and get in the box for the Texans. Shout out to Joe Mixon. Shout out to the running back core and Dare. Dare, when he comes in, he is impactful for the Texans. Like, you got to give the dude his props. There's no reason for us to kind of not have Dare on the field. I mean, Pierce might be a little bit more inclined, but Dare does not make too many mistakes when he comes in the game. Shout out to Dare for being a solid one for the Texans and the H and doing what he needs to. I like Dare in there, but I think I kind of want to see what Pierce does. He has that pop, he has that step. Show me what Pierce does. But nonetheless, the Texans come out with a win today, a hard fought win. It was a good game, 23-20. The Houston Texans wins. I'm Lance Hayes of Sports Social Live, Sports Social TV on X and IG. We're talking about the Texans. So tell me how you feel about the Texans. Throw something in the chat. Let me know. We're streaming across multiple platforms right now on IG, YouTube, Twitter. It doesn't matter. TikTok is live. So we're going live. Speaking of going live at 5 live, you got to shout out to your boy. We found Tank Dell. There's a Tank Dell sighting today at NRG Stadium. There's a Tank Dell sighting. I am happy that we were able to get him in the game, and it paid off. It paid off to get Tank Dell in there. He got him in the box. He ran a phenomenal route to get in the box this game. He a little bit of a nudge, but he got the ball. He secured the catch. I think Tank Dell was one of our top receivers today. Tank Dell had 4 receptions for 35 yards, average 8.8 with 1 touchdown. Can't be mad at that, especially when Diggs, who had 5 receptions for 81 yards and no touchdowns, but Diggs had a phenomenal game too. So I'm happy with the production that we were able to get from the receiving core. And also we had a sighting from everybody's, I don't know why he's a fan favorite, but Mechie getting active today. I was surprised to see that John Mechie was on the field, let alone had 3 receptions for 29 yards. It was kind of crazy for me to kind of just see that. I didn't expect it, but looks like he's going to have his opportunity in the coming weeks because Stephon Diggs left the game with a knee injury, a non-contact knee injury. It did not look good as a person who's had multiple knee surgeries and had the non-contact thing, that little pop and knee shift right there typically tells me that, it's either going to be a sprain or he tore something, and that's unfortunate for him. But it looks like the Texans will have to march on, and they have solid people to march on with. And one of the X factors that people don't talk about in a baller that kind of is always there for the Texans, well, there's two. There's Xavier Hutchinson and Robert Woods. Man, they are there. They're always on point for the Texans. I am happy. And it's crazy. Hey, random fact. Why do they act like Robert Woods is 45 years old and he's only 32 or something, 31 or 32? That's crazy because I'm 35 and that's wild. But Robert Woods, it's crazy. They call him the old man, the old vet. Jesus Christ. But Robert Woods is solid for the Texans, and he's a good mainstay. Him and the Xavier Hutchinson, I don't mind them being on the field at any time because they're going to ball out and take advantage of every opportunity that they're given. Shout out to those guys who were out there making a way, as well as to go back to the number one, to go back to Diggs. Shout out to Diggs, man. Number one, receiver number one out there. He had a hell of a game getting active. Imagine if he was young Diggs, man, or second contract Diggs. That would be crazy. He don't have the same step anymore. But Diggs had a hell of a game. A hell of a game for the Texans, always being in the right spot. Johnny on the spot, what they call it. So we found Dell, we found Diggs, and we were able to get those hidden gems in Robert Woods and Xavier Hutchinson going. But what I like, and I mentioned it earlier, is the Texans were able to get the tight ends going. And that's what we needed to do. The tight ends, Dalton Schultz ended up balling out for the Texans with 4 receptions for 52 yards on National Tight Ends Day. That's a stupid holiday. National Tight Ends Day is a dumb holiday because if that at that point we need to have a holiday for every position on the field. But National Tight Ends Day, what tight end lobbied for that? It had to be like a Tony Gonzalez or something like that because I don't know who else is going to get a National Tight Ends Day. Weird. But hey, shout out to Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover for balling out and contributing to the Texans offense. The Texans offense was like 267 passing yards. You can't be mad at that. 267 passing yards. Cade Stover had 2 receptions for 19 yards. So the tight ends combined for public math right now. Tight ends combined for 35 plus 19. Can somebody help me out for 54 yards, 5 receptions and 54 yards. Shout out to the tight ends, man. They did what they had to do. But the only way they can be put in a place to make those plays is coaching. And let's talk about the coaching battle that was shown on the field. You got to give props to both head coaches, Shane Steichen, D'Amico Ryan. They were coaching their asses off today. Shout out to them because we had an exciting game. It showed you that you had to coach to your personnel on every side of the ball. Special teams, offense, defense, coaching to your personnel. And you saw that on both teams. Let's start with the Colts. The Colts had Anthony Richardson going 2 for 13 out there. They made an adjustment going run heavy with Jonathan Taylor. They made an adjustment to kind of pull the ball down with Anthony Richardson and have him running a little bit more and then kind of popping those pass plays. When we roll over to the Texans, D'Amico Ryans showed us that showed the Texans, showed everybody that he has defense on lock. Hit with whatever personnel that he has. The defense is on lock. The Texans have to have one of the top 3 to I'll say top 5 because they're everybody's going to be controversial, but a for sure top 5 defensive front 7. The Texans have it. Everybody down to their backup defensive lineman ball out. One of the defensive linemen that I don't think get enough credit is Tim Settle. Tim Settle is a baller, and you could tell by how he talks, his interviews. Tim Settle is that baller. He's that dude. If you're a Tim Settle fan, shout out in the chat because you like football. I like football. I like to see that. Tim Settle is what I was kind of concerned about. I thought the Texans needed that interior defensive lineman earlier, and we went out and got Autry and all the people for the defensive line. But Fudikasi, Tim Settle have been solid for the Texans, and they fly all over the ball. Those are two guys who are being great. And shout out to Will Anderson and Hunter. The Texans defensive front seven is solid with backups. We're not even talking about our starting linebackers here. We're talking about Jake Hansen and Neville Hewitt, who are playing great football. And then we had Devin White, fresh off of a break, coming to the Texans and applying pressure to Anthony Richardson. He's a big dude. I ain't gonna say he's running for his life because he was able to shed off Fudikowski like it was nothing. That dude, Anthony Richardson, is a stud when it comes to the run game. But the defensive front seven for the Texans is a top 5 front seven, and we have to give them credit. And why are they that? To go back to our point, it's because of D'Amico Ryans is able to coach to his personnel. So D'Amico was able to coach to his personnel, and you saw Bobby Slowick able to coach to his personnel. Who do you think won this battle, D'Amico or Shane Steichen? For me, I think that it was a battle that kind of went back and forth, but D'Amico came out on top today. D'Amico came out on top because Shane Steichen made a poor game management decision to throw that terrible interception pass by a terrible pass that was intercepted by Petrie down in the Colts, like on a 10-yard line. That was a terrible decision from Shane Steichen. And you've seen that the Texans would previously make those stupid plays, and we didn't. So for the coaching battle, I have D'Amico Ryans, who called a great defense, who was able to make nut up and bench offensive lineman. I don't know whose decision it was, but ultimately he's the head coach, so it falls under him. He was able to make the move from King Green when needed and get Patterson in the game. And those are the decisions that kind of give the team confidence because it shows that you're able to make a decision when needed. The Texans weren't really put in a situation where they had to make kind of any type of huge decisions or game-changing decisions. But one thing I did see from the Texans that is different is that when there was a question about a play that might have had a challenge thrown, the Texans got back to the ball and ran a play. Previously, before, they sucked at it. They still suck at breaking the huddle on time. They take so long getting the play in, so long getting to the line, and they mentioned that on the broadcast. But in those critical time frames where it might be challenged, the play might be challenged, the Texans were doing the same thing. But this time you saw Hutchinson leading, hey, get back on the ball after that kind of juggled pass that he caught, and they got down on the ball, and they got the playoff before the Colts could challenge. And that's kind of something that I've seen, even though it went into a 2-minute warning, but the Colts could have challenged, and they got back on the ball. It was a good play by the Texans. So shout out to the coaching from the Houston Texans. I like what they were able to do. I like that D'Amico allowed Slowick to get in his groove, but you could tell there was something for Slowick this week. You can tell it was intentional about kind of just minimizing the long developing plays. You can tell that was their focus, that was their intent. And you can tell on the defensive side of the ball that D'Amico wanted to get after Anthony Richardson. Steichen was smart by getting on the second level really quickly and getting Jonathan Taylor a chance to be successful, and also using pick routes to get kind of that rover Petrie into a bad spot in the game. So shout out to both guys. It was a hell of a coaching battle. If you didn't like the coaching battle, you're crazy because it was a great game from both sides. So what I want to also talk about, and I think that it's kind of one of those things that you have to look into, is the AFC South outlook. So for the AFC South outlook, Let me change this. I'll hide this kind of screen. So for the AFC South outlook, uh, it's kind of a crazy mix up here. I think that the Texans come away with the win right here. My site didn't upload, but the Texans come away with the win, going 6-2. That leaves the Colts at 4-4. Leaves the Colts at 4-4 at 500, and then the Jags are at 2-6. Titans are at 1-6. So the Texans needed this game to get ahead for the season. They needed this game. It was a confidence building game, and also showed that the Texans are able to conquer adversity. So going down this tough stretch, they needed a slight buffer, because I believe the Colts are going to win some games. They're going to win games. They're not going to be bad. But with the Texans kind of sweeping the Colts here, it puts us in a great position going forward for the team. I think that a lot of the Texans' issues are fixable, right? Going down the stretch, a lot of the Texans' issues are kind of the issues where you can be like, hey, all right, cool, get off the ball, do a little better here and there. But the Texans' issues are fixable. So, what can they do in the AFC South? And I think it's just finish out and win. Finish out and win. The Texans have a hard schedule coming up, right? you, excuse me, the Texans are going to be battling a lot this upcoming season. You have the Jets you have the Jets coming up on Thursday. Then you have a bye week. Then you go into a gauntlet. When I say a gauntlet, you go into a gauntlet and play the Lions, Cowboys, and then the Titans. It's going to be a difficult 3-game span that I'm going to attend possibly 2 of those games. I'm coming back to the States. I'm going to travel back because I'm the number 1 global Texans fan, and hit the Lions and Cowboys game back to back. I'm going to do it. When I pull up on me. I fly all over the world to check out my Texans. I hope you do too, and support the squad. So drop the H's, drop the like. I've been liking the Texans since '99. I don't know if y'all remember when they had the logo decision and drawing contest back in when I was in elementary in '99. When they were trying to name the logo and see what it's going to look like. I remember that. I'm a true Texans fan. So back to this upcoming schedule for the Texans. The Texans in this upcoming gauntlet, they're going to have to make some kind of decisions on personnel going forward. And I want to see what people think about. If think about when it comes down to the personnel. Right now, our injury report, you have Alshire, Toto out. That's tough. Looks like Diggs is going to be out. That's tough. You have some big players out, and there's no sign of Christian Harrison. That calf he got a boneless calf or something, because I can't believe that. I don't know what's going on with Buddy, but yeah, what's going on with Harris? That's weird. That's weird to see. But Alziz, let me see that final game report, the injury report, just to talk about it, because I found it funny that so Alshire's out, Jimmy Ward out. That's what I want to talk about. What do you feel as if the Texans were going to do as far as, let's start with Jimmy Ward, Alziz, and Toa coming up? It seems like both of them are kind of working their way back into the line, but that's 3 starters for your defense, 2 linebackers. To be honest with you, I am more concerned about our linebackers, Toa and Toa and Alshire Aziz being out versus the Ward outage. And drop me some thoughts about that, because Ward, I don't feel if Ward comes back to the lineup, I think we get Warren support. It won't hurt, but I'm not going to be mad if he doesn't. He gets hurt. He's older. His growing's hurt. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, if the Ward comes back or if he doesn't come back going forward? Additionally, you're going to have Diggs on the sideline alongside Nico. I don't believe Nico's going to come back. Nico's going to probably come back after the break. So you have these critical people out. It's going to be a tough game for the team. And also, you have a Bullock probably banged up. He's not going to probably practice this game. Man, some critical injuries, but it seems like the Texans are able to kind of brave the storm going into every week. So shout out to the Houston Texans. This is Sports Social Live. I'm Lance Hayes, and we're in here. It's live. We're live at 5 now, 6 o'clock in the morning here in Japan, and I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to keep on going. So we talked about the coaching battle. We talked about the AFC outlook, and I just got to talk about one more thing, and I want to run back to it. Run back to it. People doubted Tank Dell. This whole week, people doubted Tank Dell. Tank Dell was blocking. He was blocking in the run game, blocking in the pass game. He was active in the passing routes. He was getting separation. That's everything that everybody doubted Tank Dell about this week. He was able to get active and do. So shout out to Tank Dell. His frame might be too little. He might not be able to do this. He might not be able to do that. But buddy, listen, I was one of the critics for Tank Dell. He listened and he went in. And shout out to Tank Dell. Another person I want to shout out, and I mentioned it early in the live chat and in the live today. Shout out to Gerard Johnson. Gerard Johnson is coaching his butt off when it comes to CJ Stroud. You can see that Gerard Johnson has a positive impact on CJ Stroud. That's a QB coach that's going to be an OC one day. Probably if Slowick, I don't think Slowick's going to get another job, but probably if Slowick goes on to better pastures or greener pastures and becomes a head coach, Gerard Johnson is a good coach because he protected CJ Stroud on the sideline. He's calling and assisting CJ to put him in the best position to make plays. I think that's one of the hidden gems for the Houston Texans, and I like what's going on there. So I also want to give a shout out to Texans Twitter. Texans Twitter has been live, man. I think a lot of people on Texans Twitter are super emotional, and it's good to see that we finally have some emotion coming from Twitter. But shout out to Texans Twitter, man. The fans are doing a phenomenal job. Only if we can get the fans in the game to fill up the stadium before the news and before national TV comes on. Hey, for the Lions game and the Jets game, for the Lions game, we need to pack out that stadium for Sunday night. Texans fans, we got to do better because when that national TV spotlight is on us, we have to get more people in the stands. We have to be loud. I went to a Kansas City Chiefs game when they were breaking the sound record or whatever. That was the loudest stadium I've ever heard outside of LSU's stadium, which was crazy too. But we have to get like that, Texans fans. I know the tailgate's lit. I know it's live, but we have to get more butts and seats when the Texans game starts because, man, because we're going to be on national TV 2 games in a row with the Jets, and then we're going to backdoor with the Lions. So it needs to be up. So I want to do a quick recap of what we talked about in this episode, this live stream, and I appreciate everybody for coming through on all streaming platforms. So we ran through our offensive line play. It was better than it has been in the previous weeks, but I'm still concerned about Kenyon Green being on our offensive line. Nick Caserio needs to go make that phone call. We talked about Bobby Slowick. Calling a better game today. Bobby Slowick called a solid game. You can't be mad at what Bobby Slowick did for the Houston Texans. I liked what he did. And we also had some dialogue on different platforms about Bobby Slowick. And also we talked about CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud was able to slow the game down for himself and make the plays when it counted. He was on his back a lot, or on his back foot a lot, running. He had to show resilience. It was a difficult game to watch CJ Stroud play, but he did a solid job of just staying in there, hanging in there, and doing what needs to be done. CJ Stroud went CJ Stroud went 25 for 37 with 285 yards and 1 touchdown in this game. It was a solid performance, but you couldn't tell from the actual field play. So he showed resilience. He showed that he has the grit and tenacity to stay in there, and that's what I like to see here at Sports Social TV, Sports Social Live on YouTube. I like to see grit, tenacity, especially when you have the talent to make plays. And then we go down. We talked about Joe Mixon's dominance. We were mixing with Mixon the entire game. The Texans know what they have. We have a stable running back. We have a thoroughbred back there. He can get the yards after contact. He finished the game with a solid 26 for 94, 26 carries for 94 yards and one touchdown. He broke the 100 yards, but there was a tackle for a loss. We have a shitty offensive line. You can't knock that. But Joe Mixon is a solid running back for the Houston Texans. If you like what Joe Mixon's doing, throw the H up in the chat. If you like what's going on, let's just get lit, man. We're talking about the Texans, and that's what I like to talk about. We also we also had a Tank Dell sighting. Tank Dell sighting and the stable of Diggs, Dell, Woods, Hutchinson, and your boy Mechie. I'm not a super Mechie fan. I don't know why people are, but he showed that he is there and he was able to make a catch. Mechie, all the Texans Mechie fans, you had 3 yards for 29, three catches for 29 yards. And then, but he was outshined by the national tight end today, Dalton Schultz and Cade Stover were putting together some receiving yards and catches. And then we finished up talking about the coaching battle. The coaching battle was solid. D'Amico got the win with the coaching battle. In my opinion, they both called good games. They both showed that they were making plays as far as coaching is concerned. Steichen had a few flaws in his game management where D'Amico and Bobby Slowick were able to capitalize on. So D'Amico gets the win for the coaching battle here and also the win for the game. 23-20, the Houston Texans defeat the Indianapolis Colts. It was a great game for the Texans. The AFC outlook is going well for the Texans. The Texans are 6-2 in the AFC. And Texans are 6-2 in the AFC. Colts 4-4. Jags 2-6. The Titans are 1-6. I don't know what's going on over there, but I did see for the Titans, I think it was Calvin Ridley had 6 receptions for 100 and something yards. If you're playing fantasy football, you probably want to mess around with that one. But shout out to the Houston Texans for going 6-2. This is one of the best starts we had since 2012. And I remember the 2012 season. It was phenomenal. I was living in St. Louis at the time or something like that. The Texans were balling then, and I'm excited for what they have going on now. I think that this 6-2 start is needed because going into this next stretch, as I mentioned before, is going to be difficult when it comes to the Texans. The Texans are going to have to work their butts off to kind of keep the lead and conquer the adversity with all of the injuries that are to come. It's going to be difficult because you get Nico back, you lost Diggs, you still have linebackers out, you have Ward hurt, but I think their front seven, our defense is going to have to carry us throughout the season and down into the later parts of the season. It's going to be more of a defensive effort than it is for us to kind of get where we need to get than it is kind of for the offense. So shout out to the Texans. As you see here, I got us at 6-2. 6-2. We're leading. We're 4-0 at home, which is great. And we got the win streak going. Now, let's get to the money because I always like money. Let's close it out. The Texans, from what I was seeing, were -5, over and under a 45.5. Hey, if you bet with me, you win. You bet with me, you win. I said take the Colts with the +5, and obviously we were able to cover that. The Colts +5 was the winner this week, and I'm glad that I was able to knock that one off. Didn't go with the over and under here. I was gonna go with the under, but I didn't take it. I was just like, all right, I'm more confident in the Colts going at +5. Tell me what you bet this week. That +5 was kind of was the game that I expected from the Texans and the Colts. Kind of one of those stagnant games, slow, a lot of punts. I didn't think the score would be as high. I did not think that the Texans would kind of put together that much. And I didn't think the Colts were going to be able to score like they did. I mean, barring that, the one big play, that was a great play by I believe Downs had a one big play for the Colts. Yeah, I did not see that happening. I mean, Josh Downs actually went off. He had four receptions for 109. That was a great game from Josh Downs and the Colts, but I did not see them scoring that much. But the the Colts did get the +5 and the over. They went for the over. Wait, no, I'm tripping. God dang. It wasn't the over. Yeah, I hit both of them, but I didn't bet the under. I didn't end up going there. So, yeah, we're on point with a thought process here. So, this 2 weeks in a row, I've been on point with my thought processes. So, the Texans come out, they get the win 23-20 against the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of talk on Texans Twitter about what should go on now, what should happen with the Texans. But my biggest thing is the Texans just need to have an average offensive line. That's all I want from the Texans, an average offensive line. If they get an average offensive line, there is no excuse for the Texans not to be a solid top five team. Top five. After you get in the top five, it comes down to the game of inches, a game of plays, and I feel like everybody kind of goes back and forth. If you look at the stats, EPA stats, and all those high data things, it kind of the Kansas City Chiefs aren't the highest rated team based off of analytics, but they're a top five team. You have to acknowledge that. So as long as the Texans are in that scratch that top five, we'll be okay. The way they scratch the top five and stay in the top five is by being an average offensive line. I think the average offensive line with high powered athletes will take us over the edge. And oh, by the way, I'm going to say a top five defensive line, but I really feel like it's a top three defensive line, defensive front seven when all the people are healthy. They are balling. The Texans are ready to kind of change over and kind of go into another trajectory. If they get the win against the Jets next week and then go into the bye week, heal up, and come back out, the Lions are going to have a hard time. But it's going to take a quick turn for this Thursday night game against the New York Jets. The Texans are going to have to kind of work against the New York Jets. I think the Jets, they're not a shitty team, and I think that's going to be one of the toughest things for the Texans is going into the New York Jets and just kind of seeing how they're going to play this week. The Jets just came out of the game, lost to the Patriots. I just saw that actually. They lost to the Patriots. And Drake May led Patriots. The Jets had 336 yards. The Patriots had 247. The Jets beat them in the pass game as well, but it looks like these probably turnovers. Oh man, no interceptions. Yeah, the Jets go down to the Patriots. It's kind of crazy. They beat them in everything except they beat them in every stat in total yards, passing yards, rushing yards. Huh. They must be special teams balling out for the New England Patriots, and the third down efficiency for the New England Patriots trumped the Jets. So I fully expect the Jets to come out balling against the Houston Texans. Aaron Rodgers went 17 for 28 for 233 and 2 touchdowns. Man, it's going to be a good game against the Texans and Jets. I'm excited to see what's coming up. The Texans will be taking on the 6-2 Texans will be taking on the 2-6 New York Jets. And they're playing for something down there. They're playing Aaron Rodgers is pretty cocky down there. Not cocky, he's confident. He's a baller. He's not going to want to go 2-7. So the Texans will have a hard turnaround game to against the New York Jets, and then hopefully go into the bye week, heal up. We get Nico back. We get should get Alshire back. Should get a healthy Toa, and we should get a Jimmy Ward back that's really healthy. Does it spell goodness for the Texans coming up? I don't know, but I'm positive that the Texans will give with any team they play hell. So I think that the Jets game for us is going to be a solid game. It's an away game, a long travel game in a short week. It's going to be tough. Traveling to the East Coast multiple hours on a short week. The schedule makers wanted to make the Texans hard, get schedule hard, and this is what we're seeing. So it's gonna be difficult for the Texans, but nonetheless, the Texans come out and win the game. They beat the Colts this week, 23-20 to go 6-2. I'm Lance Hayes. I'm gonna get off this live now, but follow Sports Social TV on X and subscribe to Sports Social Live on YouTube. You subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what I can do better to give you this great Texans content because I am the #1 Texans fan. I'm Lance Hayes, Sports Social Live. Subscribe, like, share.